Good evening, my friends. Let us settle by the fire and begin at the point where many lives go wrong. A great number of people spend their finest years chasing money, and a second great number spend those same years chasing status, and both camps often arrive at the same tired inn by middle age. They are better dressed, perhaps. They know how to speak in smoother tones. Their shoes may shine, yet their minds remain leased out by the hour. What matters is not the coin you can touch this evening, but the machine you have set in motion for tomorrow. Wealth is not the stack of notes in a drawer. Wealth is the orchard, the code, the ownership stake, the small system that keeps bearing fruit after you have gone indoors and put out the lamp. Money is useful, but it is a tool of transfer. It is a receipt for value already created, a movable token that says the world owes you something for labor already spent. The difficulty begins when a man mistakes the receipt for the bakery. He spends his life collecting slips of paper and never builds the oven. Then he wonders why rest makes him anxious. The answer is plain. He has trained himself to eat only from his own hand. The hand grows tired. It always does. One may earn a noble income by selling time, and many honorable people do, but one does not become free that way. One merely becomes expensive. Status is the trickier seduction because it flatters an older part of human nature. The mind prefers applause to arithmetic. It would rather be admired in public than independent in private. Status is the old village contest dressed in modern tailoring. Who sits nearest the front? Who is invited first? Whose title requires the longest breath? It is a game of rank, not creation. To rise in it, another must often be lowered. That is why it exhausts the spirit and sharpens the face. The successful status player may win the room and still lose the decade. He becomes an expert in comparison and a stranger to his own work. So the first lesson is not romantic, but it is clean. Seek the thing that can live without your constant attendance. Seek equity, systems, products, ideas with reach, and tools that continue to serve after the craftsman has gone home. And do not make an enemy of wealth in your own heart. Many people secretly resent moneyed success, then wonder why prosperity does not sit comfortably beside them. Wealth made ethically is not vulgar. It is often evidence that someone solved a problem so well that the solution kept traveling after the solver stopped speaking. There are rascals in every field, of course. There are also rascals in charity committees and church basements. Vice is a human habit, not a business model. The honest aim is simple enough. Build value that outlasts the day. Once a person understands that wealth is built, not merely earned, the next question is where that building power comes from. Here, many are told to collect credentials like teacups, one after another, until the shelf bends. Credentials have their place. I would not ask a barber to remove my appendix, nor a poet to design a bridge. Yet the market pays unusually well, not for what is merely certified, but for what is uncommon, difficult to copy, and deeply joined to a particular human being. There is knowledge that can be handed out in rows and tested in blue books. Then there is the strange, living knowledge that grows where temperament, obsession, experience, and skill cross paths. This second sort is what Naval points toward. It is not always tidy enough for a classroom. Indeed, if a great institution can train 1,000 people to do it in the same way, then the supply will rise and the premium will fall. The crowd can be prepared and therefore replaced. Specific knowledge is harder to box. It may look like unusual taste joined to technical skill, or streetwise judgment married to patient analysis, or design sense mixed with code, or humor mixed with sales. A man who knows a little philosophy, a little technology, and a great deal about how people deceive themselves may become more valuable than a dozen specialists who know one corridor very well and cannot open a door. There is a practical test for this. The work feels like play to you, while it looks like labor to other people. That sentence is not permission for laziness. It is an observation about energy. When your natural curiosity meets your practiced ability, the hours begin to lose their usual weight. You remain willing long after your competitors become theatrical about their suffering. They count the minutes. You follow the thread. They ask when the meeting ends. You ask one more question. Over years, this difference compounds into what looks from the outside like talent, though much of it is simply affection held steady over time. And authenticity matters here more than fashion. Many careers are built on imitation, which is why they remain crowded and brittle. The moment a man tries to become a second-rate version of someone famous, he steps into a queue. But no one can outcompete you at being more precisely yourself, provided there is substance under the self and not merely performance. A peculiar mixture of interests can become a moat. One person may blend architecture, science fiction, and urban history into rare insight. Another may combine psychology, cosmetics, and storytelling into a business others cannot quite reproduce. The world often rewards the unusual package after first misunderstanding it. That is a fair price. Confusion is often the tax collected on originality. If specific knowledge is the blade, leverage is the arm that swings it beyond ordinary human reach. In earlier centuries, leverage wore heavy boots. It came through land, through ships, through factories, through men ordered in rows. One could become influential by commanding labor or deploying capital. That old machinery still matters. Yet, the great modern turn is that leverage has become lighter, faster, and in some forms available without permission. This changes the destiny of the ordinary ambitious person. One no longer needs a duke's letter, a banker's nod, or a regiment of clerks to extend one's effort. Consider the old leverage of labor. To manage many people is to multiply output, yes, but it is also to inherit every mood, every miscommunication, every ambition wearing a polite tie. Some are born with the appetite for this. Most are not. Capital is cleaner in one sense, for money does not call in sick, but it usually sits behind gates. The newcomer needs access before access begins to generate more access. That is why code and media matter so deeply. A piece of software can serve thousands while its maker sleeps. A recording, an essay, a course, a tool, a design system, an idea expressed with clarity can travel without asking leave of a committee. The modern world is full of invisible workers that do not eat lunch. This is the true revolution behind many new fortunes. Not merely that technology exists, but that replication has become cheap, while reach has become vast. If you teach one person in a room, you have had a respectable afternoon. If you design a system that teaches 10,000 people without further effort from you, the mathematics change. If you advise one client, the day is spent. If you build a product that solves the same problem every morning for strangers you will never meet, time itself begins to loosen its grip on income. That is why a small team with a sharp product can now outweigh a lumbering institution full of respectable departments and expensive chairs. The practical advice is severe but generous. Productize yourself. Do not remain forever in the posture of custom labor if your knowledge can be packaged into a repeatable form. The teacher should consider the course, the analyst, the software tool, the designer, the template, the consultant, the framework, the thoughtful worker, the media channel where insight can accumulate. One need not become a clown for the internet. Heaven protect us from that profession swelling any further. But one should learn to create assets that can be copied at near zero cost. The first copy may be difficult. The 1,000th is nearly free. That is a form of grace the industrial age rarely granted common people. There is another ingredient without which leverage remains timid and specific knowledge remains underpaid. That ingredient is accountability. By this, I do not mean the stale schoolroom version, where a child remembers to bring the right notebook and is praised as dependable. I mean the adult willingness to stand where outcomes can find you, to sign your name, to let success and failure travel back to your own door. Most people avoid this because they do not wish to be embarrassed, blamed, exposed, or held to a standard they may not meet. Quite understandable. Also quite expensive. The anonymous worker enjoys safety of a sort. If the project fails, the institution absorbs the shame. If it succeeds, the institution absorbs most of the glory as well. This arrangement comforts the nervous and impoverishes the ambitious. The market pays more to those who accept visible responsibility because visible responsibility contains real risk. When your name is attached to a product, a company, an argument, or a decision, you are staking reputation, and reputation is a dear collateral. Society may not always be fair, but it is often alert to courage when courage is tied to execution. Think of a ship at sea. Many aboard may be competent, even noble, but not all are captains. The captain is not paid more merely for wearing a better coat. He is paid more because the storm uses his name first. When direction is uncertain and consequences large, the one who decides takes on asymmetric danger. Therefore, when the vessel comes safely to harbor with the cargo intact, his share is likewise asymmetric. In business, this appears as equity, authority, trust, and future opportunity. A person who repeatedly stands behind results becomes easier to back, easier to hire, easier to follow. That reputation compounds in quiet ways that accountants do not always notice. There is discomfort in this path, and one must not pretend otherwise. You will fail in public from time to time. You will be misunderstood by those who mistake courage for vanity. Some will whisper that you are lucky when things go well and reckless when they do not. Let them pass. Their own caution is often disguised disappointment. What matters is not never being wrong, but becoming the sort of person whose judgment and effort can be traced clearly through events. A hidden life may be peaceful. It is rarely richly rewarded. If you want the upside, you must let the downside know your address. In a world of vast leverage, the importance of judgment rises like water behind a dam. When tools are small, mistakes are local. A bad decision with a shovel is still unfortunate, but it remains mostly one man's afternoon. A bad decision with software, capital, media reach, or institutional power can echo for years. Therefore, one must not worship effort alone. Effort is noble and often necessary, but direction governs the value of exertion. Rowing faster toward the rocks is no triumph. It is only a more energetic form of tragedy. Judgment is the ability to perceive consequences before they fully bloom. It is the art of seeing second-order effects while other people are still admiring first-order excitement. Many clever people are poor judges because cleverness and clarity are cousins, not twins. Cleverness likes speed, display, the solving of puzzles in public. Judgment likes silence, patience, a willingness to look foolish while the world is being noisy. Wisdom, in this sense, is judgment without strain. It is what remains after enough reality has rubbed vanity off the mind. This is why free time matters so much. The modern person treats busyness as a badge, but busyness often means a life governed by reaction. One cannot think deeply while being nibbled to death by notifications, errands, meetings, and minor demands wrapped in false urgency. The worker rows. The captain watches the weather. There must be white space in the day for thought to gather itself. A man who never permits boredom will rarely discover anything important about his own life. The mind needs room to combine fragments, test possibilities, and hear the quiet objection that arrives after the loud enthusiasm has left the room. So, if you wish to improve judgment, do not begin by collecting more opinions. Begin by reducing noise. Read enduring things. Make predictions and revisit them. Notice where emotion bends your analysis. Notice which incentives are shaping the story you are being sold. Most of all, protect a portion of your life from constant interruption. To think well is not a decorative hobby for the privileged. It is an economic advantage and a moral safeguard. A society with more leverage and less judgment becomes very efficient at regretting itself. There is a principle so simple that many bright people keep trying to escape it, only to circle back with more expensive shoes. Play long-term games with long-term people. Almost every durable return in life, whether in wealth, friendship, reputation, or knowledge, arises from compounding. And compounding requires time uninterrupted by betrayal. The short game can be thrilling. It can also be profitable in flashes. But it trains the wrong muscles. It teaches a person to optimize for extraction rather than relationship, appearance rather than substance, immediate gain rather than durable trust. Game theory gives this truth a colder vocabulary, yet the old village already understood it. When an exchange is one-off, the temptation to cheat rises. The tourist may never return. The contract may never repeat. But when two people expect to meet again, honesty becomes not merely moral, but rational. Cooperation acquires a return. Trust lowers friction. Fewer lawyers are needed. Less theater is performed. More can be attempted together. Over decades, this creates an invisible architecture of opportunity that newcomers cannot quite explain. They call it luck because they cannot see the accumulated proof beneath the ease. Compounding is slow enough in the beginning to offend modern impatience. The early years of reputation look almost unfair. The careful person is passed by the flashy one. The honest merchant seems dull beside the loud speculator. The thoughtful worker appears less glamorous than the hustler with 10 slogans and an appalling handshake. Then the curve bends. Knowledge hooks into knowledge. Relationships deepen. People begin to say yes with less hesitation. Entire negotiations disappear because trust has replaced ceremony. This is the great dividend of playing repeated games well. A reliable person eventually gets to move at a speed the unreliable can never buy. One must also choose one's companions with discipline. Long-term games fail when played with short-term minds. A single disloyal partner can interrupt years of compounding. A vain associate can convert shared work into status theater. An impatient investor can force foolish timing. So part of wisdom lies in quick discernment. If you would not gladly work with someone for many years, be careful about working with that person for even one season. The right people lengthen the future. The wrong people turn every quarter into a hostage situation. One of Naval's more practical provocations concerns the value of one's hour. It is a useful exercise, though it unsettles people because it exposes how casually they surrender fragments of life. To estimate an hourly value is not to become cold or mercenary. It is to remember that time is the one input that cannot be replaced, refunded, refinanced, or negotiated back from yesterday. Money lost may be earned again. Reputation damaged may, with some luck and much labor, be restored. Time goes in one direction with the calm confidence of a tax collector. When a person assigns too little value to his hour, he becomes available to nonsense. He says yes to low-grade obligations, recurring annoyances, tedious errands that should be delegated, and commitments made merely to avoid mild social discomfort. He will drive across town to save a trifling sum while spending the richer thing in order to preserve the poorer. This is common because the bill does not arrive in a visible envelope. No clerk stamps the wasted afternoon. Yet the cost is real all the same. A life is often squandered not by catastrophe, but by administrative leakage. To value time properly also clarifies professional choices. A worker earning a handsome salary may still be underpaid if every increase comes only by selling more attention, more energy, more presence. Another with a lower current income but growing ownership, increasing leverage, and widening future options may be on the sounder path. The arithmetic of careers cannot be read from cash flow alone. One must ask what the work is making possible. Is it building judgment, assets, reputation, and freedom, or merely inflating a gilded dependence? Plenty of people are well compensated for remaining stuck. There is a gentler dimension as well. When you begin to respect your time, you may also respect your quiet more fiercely. You become less willing to spend your evenings in social obligations that leave a gray taste in the mind. You protect sleep. You become more deliberate about where your attention goes. This is not selfishness. It is stewardship. No one keeps your calendar with the seriousness your mortality deserves. If you do not guard your hours, the world will gladly convert them into errands for other people's ambitions. Luck is a troublesome word because people use it to mean several different things while pretending they mean one. There is blind luck, the kind that arrives without invitation, as when one is born into a decent home rather than a cruel one, or happens to meet a benefactor at the proper season. There is luck born of motion, where action increases encounters and therefore opportunities. There is luck born of preparation, where knowledge allows a person to recognize value that others walk past. And there is the rarest sort, which may be called reputational luck, where a person's character becomes so legible that favorable outcomes begin to seek him out. This last form deserves attention. Over time, people come to know what you are like. They know whether you finish things, whether you keep your word, whether you panic under strain, whether your taste is trustworthy, whether your judgment holds in foggy conditions. Once this becomes established, luck begins to wear your address on its envelope. Someone hears of an opening and thinks of you. A partnership forms because a difficult person was ruled out and you were not. An opportunity appears seemingly from nowhere, though in truth, it rose from years of invisible signaling. The world often calls this fortune. The deeper accounting calls it compounded credibility. Action matters too. A stationary life encounters fewer accidents of value. The shy person who never publishes, never asks, never experiments, and never ships his work will call the world unfair, and perhaps it is in places, but he is also deprived chance of places to land. One must be in the stream to catch fish. This does not mean frantic motion for its own sake. Restless foolishness creates only a wider radius of foolishness. It means deliberate activity, consistent output, and enough courage to be seen before you feel fully ready. Providence seems curiously fond of those who make themselves available to it. At the same time, one must avoid the childish fantasy of total control. Some doors open because a storm elsewhere closed another. Some failures are not deserved, and some windfalls are not earned. The mature response is neither bitterness nor superstition. It is readiness. Do the work that makes you more probable to good outcomes. Build the sort of mind and reputation that can convert accident into advantage. When luck visits, give it a chair. But do not spend the whole winter waiting by the window in your coat. There is a type of intelligent person who can explain every useful principle and embody almost none of them. He is excellent company in a drawing room and a dreadful ally in enterprise. He mistakes comprehension for transformation. Naval's counsel cuts against this vanity. The world pays for what is built, shipped, tested, sold, refined, and repeated. Insight is precious, but unacted insight curdles into self-congratulation. The mind prefers the clean pleasure of understanding because reality is clumsy, reputationally dangerous, and full of awkward first drafts. Action has a cleansing effect on thought. It reveals which ideas survive contact with conditions and which were merely well-phrased. A business plan no customer wants, a product too confusing to use, a theory that collapses under ordinary incentives, a life plan dependent on becoming a different species of human by next Tuesday. These are all corrected faster by motion than by rumination. To act is to submit one's imagination to honest feedback. That feedback may be rude, but it is useful in a way encouragement is not. Speed matters, though not the frantic kind celebrated by unserious people. One should move quickly in testing, learning, publishing, iterating, and making small reversible decisions. Delay often masquerades as perfectionism, when in fact, it is fear wearing spectacles. Better a modest thing released than a masterpiece eternally under revision in the basement of your mind. Every meaningful craft includes embarrassment somewhere near the entrance. The novice who can survive that toll reaches competence. The novice who insists on dignity at every stage becomes a philosopher of unrealized potential. Yet action must remain tied to direction and to self-knowledge. Otherwise, one becomes a well-motivated fool, which is among the more dangerous creatures in commerce. The right rhythm is to think clearly, decide firmly, act promptly, and revise without melodrama. Let us be honest for a moment. Many lives do not fail for lack of intelligence. They fail because the owner waited for unanimous certainty, and certainty never came. So the years were spent polishing the lock instead of opening the door. The usual picture of retirement is oddly tragic when examined in lamplight. A person postpones living for decades, stores up money, resentment, and fatigue. then hopes to begin life after the organs have become more opinionated. This arrangement is presented as sensible. It may be necessary in some measure, but as an ideal, it is bleak. Naval's challenge is sharper. The real aim is not to flee labor permanently, but to structure life so that one no longer needs escape from one's days. Retirement in the deepest sense is when your life no longer requires a fantasy of later in order to feel bearable. This does not mean indolence. It means agency. If a person controls his time, chooses his collaborators, does meaningful work, and can rest without terror, he has touched a form of retirement even while remaining productive. On the other hand, the executive who needs a 2-week vacation merely to remember his own children is not free. He is a well-compensated hostage. Freedom cannot be measured solely by whether one works. It must also be measured by whether one can stop, redirect, refuse, and still remain intact. One reason people endure wretched arrangements for too long is that they think of freedom as a distant financial number rather than a present design problem. They imagine a glorious future when all constraints vanish at once. Life is less theatrical. More often, freedom is assembled by degrees, lowering unnecessary expenses, building assets, choosing work with leverage, reducing status games, learning to want less foolishly, protecting health, cultivating friends who do not require expensive disguises. A person may grow freer each year without ever staging a dramatic exit from the office with a brass band and a speech no one requested. And there is another truth, gentler but sterner. If you do not know how to be at peace with yourself now, a larger bank account will not teach the lesson later. The retired bore was often an employed bore with better suits. The inwardly frantic do not become wise by ceasing to commute. Therefore, build a life you would not mind continuing. Make work more aligned, not simply more absent. Make rest natural, not delayed. The goal is not permanent leisure. The goal is to stop living as if real life will begin after the paperwork finally gives permission. At about this point in the conversation, prudent listeners begin to suspect that wealth alone cannot complete the human assignment. Quite right. A person may solve the money puzzle and still remain internally disordered, easily offended, chronically comparative, and strangely unable to enjoy a clear morning. Naval speaks of happiness not as a random gift, but as a skill. This is an unfashionable idea because it returns responsibility to the individual. Many would rather treat unhappiness as weather. It is often partly weather. It is also, to an uncomfortable degree, practice. The mind develops habits just as the body does. If one rehearses resentment, outrage, envy, self-dramatization, and perpetual dissatisfaction, one becomes skilled at producing them. They arrive more quickly and leave more slowly. Conversely, if one learns observation, gratitude, perspective, emotional sobriety, and the ability to interrupt destructive loops, one becomes harder to disturb by the smaller absurdities of life. Happiness in this sense is not giddiness. It is not the grin of a salesman or the chemical optimism of a poster. It is a steadier condition, a reduction in unnecessary inner conflict. This is why external success so often disappoints those who worship it. They expected achievement to replace mental discipline. Instead, it amplifies whatever was already present. The anxious become anxious at a higher income. The vain become vain across a wider audience. The restless become restless on better mattresses. What matters is not whether life contains pain, but whether the mind has been trained to stop manufacturing extra suffering from each ordinary difficulty. A lost contract hurts. A lost contract plus an identity crisis plus 3 days of self-accusation hurts much more. The second portion is optional more often than people think. One must therefore build a private method for returning to center. For some, this includes meditation. For others, walking, reading, solitude, prayer, honest conversation, exercise, disciplined sleep, or the deliberate reduction of stimulants masquerading as entertainment. The form matters less than the principle. Your inner state cannot be entirely outsourced to events. Learn to run your own weather. The world will still bring storms. But a house built well meets the storm differently than a tent whose owner keeps insisting the forecast ought to have been kinder. A large portion of suffering arises not from difficult decisions themselves, but from the fog people spread around them in order to postpone discomfort. They pretend there are 3 options when there are 2. They rename fear as prudence and exhaustion as loyalty. They keep one foot in the old room while praising the new house. Naval's style is often bracing because it invites an almost surgical honesty. What are the facts? What are the incentives? What is the trade? Which pain are you actually choosing by delaying a choice that already knows its own answer? The mind dislikes irreversible decisions because they announce adulthood. To choose one path is to bury 100 flattering imaginary selves. This is why people linger in indecision. Indecision preserves fantasy. The unmarried man can still imagine every possible marriage. The employee who never commits to a craft can still imagine genius in all of them. The founder who never launches still enjoys the clean nobility of intention without the vulgarity of customers. But life only pays in reality. Imagined excellence has sentimental value and almost no market value. A hard choice is often made easier by examining what each option costs if maintained over time. Staying in the wrong city has a cost. Continuing the dishonest relationship has a cost. Remaining in a career that deadens the spirit has a cost. These costs are usually collected quietly, which is why people ignore them. A wrong path rarely sends a trumpet. It takes your vitality in installments. Then, one day you call the total bad luck. No, my friend, it was a subscription. The practical rule is to seek truth before comfort. Ask what you would advise a beloved younger sibling in the same position. Ask which option expands honesty, agency, and long-term self-respect. Ask what future burden grows heavier with delay. Then choose and pay the pain once rather than financing it indefinitely through ambiguity. Clean pain is often kinder than dirty avoidance. The scalpel hurts. So does infection. Only one of them heals. Naval has spoken beautifully of reading, and rightly so. To read well is to borrow the nervous systems of extraordinary people without inheriting their enemies, tax bills, or unfortunate facial hair. Through books, one may spend an evening with a stoic emperor, a modern investor, a mystic, a scientist, a comic novelist, and a historian, all while remaining in a chair that does not judge. This is among civilization's more miraculous arrangements. Yet reading only becomes transformative when it moves beyond consumption into integration. There are readers who collect books the way vain households collect porcelain. They display taste without digesting thought. Then there are readers who enter into active relationship with what they read. They argue in the margins. They return. They connect one author's insight to another's contradiction. They notice recurring truths expressed in different centuries under different garments. Over time, this practice produces judgment because the mind begins to see patterns where others see isolated episodes. History stops feeling like a museum and begins feeling like a practical guide to recurring human behavior. The best reading is partly opportunistic and partly disciplined. One should read according to deep curiosity, because curiosity supplies energy, and a book read with appetite reaches farther than a book consumed dutifully. But one should also read the enduring works, the difficult works, the works that resist the habits of the present moment. The new teaches speed and relevance. The old teaches proportion. Together they prevent provinciality of time. A person who reads only current opinion risks confusing trend with truth. A person who reads only the dead may become elegant but unadapted. The healthy mind keeps company with both. Books also offer a refuge from the mob. In an age of incessant commentary, reading restores the long form, the developed argument, the quiet wrestling with complexity. It trains attention, and attention is now a scarce asset. The mind prefers interruption because interruption absolves it from depth. Reading asks more. It asks that you stay, that you follow a thought beyond its slogan, that you become more difficult to manipulate because you have met larger minds in private and discovered that most public noise is thin soup served in oversized bowls. Freedom is often discussed as if it were only political, financial, or geographic. Those matter greatly. Yet, there is a subtler bondage common among prosperous people. They can travel, spend, and speak, yet remain governed by expectations they never examined. They live by scripts inherited from family, status culture, professional norms, and fear of exclusion. They call themselves independent while adjusting every preference to fit a room full of equally anxious people. This is not freedom. It is a more expensive cage. True freedom begins with the ability to say no without rage, and yes without self-betrayal. It requires enough self-knowledge to know what one is unwilling to trade away, even for applause or comfort. Many souls are sold cheaply because the market offers them in small installments. A little more status here, a little more money there, one more compromise explained as temporary, one more silence justified as strategic. Soon the person cannot quite identify which parts of his life are chosen and which are merely inherited obligations polished to look respectable. Financial freedom supports this inner freedom, of course. Dependence narrows speech and bends judgment. A person with no savings is more likely to flatter foolish power because rent is persuasive. That is why wealth matters morally as well as practically. It permits refusal. It allows experimentation. It gives truth-telling a longer runway. But money alone does not produce autonomy. Plenty of wealthy people remain enslaved to prestige, social comparison, and the opinions of those they do not even admire. They have purchased a larger theater for the same old insecurity. Freedom grows when one writes personal principles clearly enough to live by them. Not slogans for public admiration, but rules sturdy enough to guide ordinary Tuesday behavior. What will you not do for money? What relationships deserve your best attention? How much solitude is necessary for sanity? Which forms of ambition nourish rather than poison? Once written, these principles reduce negotiation with chaos. They become a private constitution. Without such a constitution, freedom becomes mere appetite, and appetite is a poor governor. It smiles generously and leaves you bankrupt in the morning. When people first hear of meditation, they often imagine incense, dramatic posture, or a lifestyle that makes conversation at dinner parties somewhat more exhausting than it needs to be. The deeper matter is much simpler and more useful. Meditation is the practice of seeing thoughts arise without immediately becoming their servant. This is a revolutionary ability because most human misery is not caused by thought alone, but by instant identification with thought. A fear appears, and the person says, "This is me." An anger appears, and the person says, "This is justice." A craving appears, and the person says, "This is truth." The observing mind changes this relationship. It notices that thoughts come and go with astonishing promiscuity. Noble thoughts, petty thoughts, absurd thoughts, old songs, old humiliations, plans for dinner, revenge fantasies against a man who merged badly in traffic 3 years ago. The mind is not a cathedral choir. It is more like a busy street with poor zoning laws. Meditation does not require stopping the traffic. It requires ceasing to run into the road, embracing every carriage as destiny. Once this distance appears, suffering often reduces at once, not because life has improved, but because the inner machinery has stopped grabbing every passing fragment. This has practical consequences beyond serenity. A person who can observe thought is less easily manipulated by panic, propaganda, envy, and social contagion. He can notice the surge and decide whether to act. That pause is power. Without it, personality is merely weather reacting to weather. With it, one begins to choose responses. This is why meditation belongs not only to monasteries, but to boardrooms, marriages, workshops, hospitals, and any place where human volatility causes expensive consequences. One need not become mystical about it. Sit, breathe, notice, return, repeat. The simplicity offends the ambitious because there is nothing to boast about except the resulting clarity, and clarity is a humble kind of prestige. But in a noisy age, the ability to witness one's own mind without drowning in it may be among the rarest luxuries. It costs little. It asks much. And like all worthwhile disciplines, it seems pointless right up until the day one realizes it has quietly altered the architecture of one's suffering. Human beings love identity because it answers the nervous question of who one is supposed to be. I am this sort of person, not that sort. I belong to this camp, this profession, this ideology, this tribe, this story. Some identity is necessary. Without it, action becomes impossible. A carpenter must, at least occasionally, agree that he is indeed the fellow who ought to bring the hammer. Yet identity becomes dangerous when it hardens beyond utility into sacred costume. Then every contradiction feels like a threat, every change like treason, every disagreement like personal injury. Naval's style invites us to loosen the grip. If you cling too tightly to any label, you begin to defend the label rather than examine reality. The investor cannot admit a bad thesis because smart investors are not supposed to miss. The writer cannot start again because gifted people are expected to be naturally fluid. The parent cannot apologize because authority would seem diminished. The political zealot cannot update because the tribe would smell movement. Soon the person is no longer living. He is maintaining a museum exhibit about himself. A lighter identity is more adaptive and often more truthful. Instead of saying, "I am this forever," one may say, "I currently practice this, value this, pursue this, or am learning this." Such language leaves room for correction. It prevents the ego from attaching mortal stakes to temporary positions. This matters in happiness as much as in wealth. If you define yourself as a winner, every setback becomes a moral wound. If you define yourself as a learner, setbacks become tuition. One posture invites panic. The other invites revision. There is relief in becoming less solid. You discover that many insults pass through more easily when there is less brittle self to crack. You become less defensive and therefore more perceptive. The world can teach you again. That is no small gift. Many adults are not old in years, but calcified in self-description. They move through life carrying an antique portrait of themselves and complaining that reality no longer matches the frame. Better to travel lighter. The river changes. So do you. One of the more liberating ideas in this whole body of thought is that many events are less inherently charged than our interpretation makes them. Reality often arrives raw. Then the mind seasons it with narrative, comparison, fear, vanity, memory, and prophecy. A comment becomes an insult. A delay becomes a conspiracy. A failure becomes an identity. A quiet evening becomes proof of abandonment. The event is one thing. The story is another. We suffer from both, but only one is guaranteed. This does not mean the world is painless or morally blank. There is injustice, loss, cruelty, and grief. Any philosophy that denies this should be placed gently on a shelf next to decorative nonsense. The point is subtler. Between event and anguish lies interpretation, and interpretation can often be examined. Suppose the business deal fails. That hurts. But then comes the cascade. I am foolish. I am behind. They must think less of me. This always happens. My future is narrowing. By supper, one failed deal has expanded into a cosmology. Such inflation of pain is common. It is also trainable downward. The practice here is not denial, but precision. What happened exactly? What does it mean necessarily? What part is fact, and what part is invented by habit? The mind prefers broad conclusions because broad conclusions feel efficient. They also produce avoidable misery. Precision reduces drama. It keeps suffering closer to its actual size. A rainy day may still be wet, but it need not become evidence that the heavens themselves have entered a campaign against your mood. People who cultivate this neutrality often appear unusually calm, though calm is not the whole story. They are calmer because they are less willing to feed every event into the furnace of self-importance. They grant life its roughness without writing themselves as the sole tragic lead in every scene. There is dark humor in this, and perhaps mercy too. The universe is large, and most inconveniences are not personal letters from fate. The soup is cold. The train is late. The email was curt. Civilization will stagger on. Modern people often ask about meaning as if it were a product hidden somewhere between the right career and a tasteful vacation. It rarely appears in that form. Meaning is not usually found by sampling pleasures until one of them glows. More often, it emerges from responsibility freely embraced, a child cared for, a craft developed seriously, a company built honestly, a community improved, a body maintained, a promise kept when easier options were available. Weight accepted voluntarily becomes dignity. Burden accepted consciously becomes meaning. The trouble is that responsibility has poor advertising. It arrives with inconvenience, repetition, and accountability. Meaningful things often require rising early, staying late, bearing uncertainty, and doing unglamorous tasks without immediate praise. Shallow pleasures advertise loudly because they must. They have little staying power. Meaning need not shout because it roots itself in structure. A person devoted to something worthwhile can endure many dull days without calling life empty. The aim clarifies the monotony. One must also be careful not to outsource meaning to ideology, celebrity, or endless abstraction. It is tempting to attach oneself to grand causes one barely understands because borrowed importance feels warmer than ordinary obligation. But much meaning lives very near at hand, in making one's own character less chaotic, in treating people better, in becoming reliable, in producing work that reduces confusion or increases beauty. The grand and the humble are not enemies, yet the humble is often the doorway through which the grand becomes real. This is why self-knowledge matters. Not everyone is called to the same burdens. One person finds meaning in invention, another in teaching, another in healing, another in parenthood, another in scholarship, another in building institutions that outlast vanity. The form differs. The common thread is commitment. What matters is not the size of the audience, but the sincerity of the stewardship. Even a small lamp is meaningful if one tends it faithfully in a dark room. Optimism has been trivialized by people who confuse it with sugary denial. They smile too early, speak too broadly, and leave others feeling lonelier rather than stronger. Real optimism is sterner. It does not deny difficulty. It simply refuses to treat difficulty as final evidence against possibility. It is a working assumption that effort, adaptation, and time can improve many situations that panic would only worsen. In this sense, optimism is not a mood. It is a strategic orientation. Pessimism often passes for sophistication because it predicts pain and therefore feels intelligent. Anyone can sound deep by anticipating decline. It requires less courage than hope. Hope risks embarrassment. Pessimism protects vanity by lowering expectations in advance. Yet chronically pessimistic people are poor builders. They hesitate, underinvest, misread opportunities, and communicate discouragement as if it were realism. Their caution can become self-confirming. They see fewer openings because they approach life as a courtroom already certain of the verdict. Optimism, rightly held, pairs well with accountability. It says the future is not guaranteed, but it is influenceable. Therefore, one acts, one prepares, one recovers quickly. One does not dramatize every obstacle into an oracle. This mindset attracts collaborators not because it is blindly cheerful, but because it makes effort feel sensible. People lend energy to those who seem capable of converting adversity into progress. They avoid those who turn every setback into a sermon on futility. There is a moral dimension here too. To be constructively optimistic is to become easier to live and work with. You do not spread despair for recreation. You do not treat cynicism as personality. You retain the ability to imagine better outcomes and therefore help bring them within reach. The world has no shortage of gloomy commentators. Most of them would wilt if asked to build a chicken coop. Better to be the person who sees clearly, hopes intelligently, and gets to work before the professional doubters have finished arranging their adjectives. At the end of all this advice stands a stern kindness. No teacher, doctor, mentor, author, investor, trainer, philosopher, or celebrated voice can finally live on your behalf. Others may point, warn, encourage, diagnose, challenge, and illuminate. All useful things, none sufficient. The final work remains intimate and non-transferable. You must choose. You must refuse. You must build. You must correct. You must sit with your own mind. You must bear the consequences of your patterns until you decide they have cost enough. This is adulthood stripped of decoration. The principal and agent problem appears everywhere. The expert advising you will never care exactly as much as you do, because he cannot. Your health, wealth, sanity, reputation, and soul are nearest to you by design. This is not cause for paranoia. It is cause for responsibility. Listen to experts, certainly. Learn from books, mentors, and example. But keep command. The moment you hand over the steering wheel of your deepest interests too casually, you invite drift at best and exploitation at worst. Many people do this because decision is tiring. So is regret. There is also a warning here against turning any wise person into a guru. To admire insight is healthy. To surrender judgment is not. If you read Naval or anyone else and emerge merely eager to imitate the man's life rather than understand the principles through your own temperament, you have missed the gift and kept the wrapping. The proper use of wisdom is selective adoption. Try it. Test it. Keep what proves true in the laboratory of your days. Discard what does not fit your nature or your honest duties. No borrowed philosophy should be allowed to become a fashionable prison. So the closing counsel is plain. Save yourself. Not alone in the sense of refusing all help, but alone in the sense that no help absolves you of final responsibility. Build your wealth ethically. Find your specific knowledge. Use leverage wisely. Guard your mind. Choose long-term people. Learn happiness as a discipline. Read deeply. Meditate. Hold identity lightly. Meet reality with precision. Accept meaningful responsibility. Remain optimistic enough to act. Then return again and again to the oldest and hardest command in a free life. Govern yourself. The fire burns low now, and the house is quiet. That is as it should be. A good night's wisdom is not a performance. It is a lamp left on in the right room. There is one more thing worth saying before the embers turn to ash. A human life is usually changed less by a single revelation than by the repeated return to a handful of sound principles. The world offers distraction in industrial quantities. It sells urgency, comparison, outrage, vanity, and counterfeit belonging with great efficiency. Against this tide, a calm mind and a deliberate life will often look almost rebellious. Yet this quiet rebellion is where dignity lives. Build patiently. Learn carefully. Rest honestly. Refuse games that make the soul smaller. Keep company with reality, and keep faith with your better nature, even when no audience is present. The results may not arrive with trumpets. Much of what is finest in life rarely does. Now, good night, my friends.